welcome to the Courageous Self-Care Podcast. I'm your host, Christina Marlette. On this show, we explore self-care that goes beyond bubble baths, chocolate, and wine. It gets deep and it gets uncomfortable, and that's why it changes your life. I am so thrilled today to have my friend Elise Russell on as our guest. Elise, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you here, and let us know a little bit about what you do.
I am founder and creative director at Pony Friday, which is Pony Friday. We're a motivational lifestyle brand, and we help entrepreneurs chase their dreams.
That's fun. On a pony.
On a pony.
With fireworks and fun. I love it. And I have checked out Elise's merchandise. It is super cute. I'm planning to put it in order sometime soon. So we'll get you details on how you can access that fun stuff at the end of the interview. So Elise, I love to get our guests to share their favorite self-care practice. What would you say yours is?
I like to play, and that takes on all sorts of variations. I have 2 dogs and a horse, and I find that connecting with them on that very present level, when you're out with a horse, you have to be present, and if you're not, things don't go well, and I find that just playing with my dogs at home really helps, and it's so simple, and I think that when I allow myself to be childish and childlike, I am the best version of myself. And I think as adults, we often forget to play.
Oh, I totally agree. I'm covered in goosebumps, which happens every time I hear the truth. And it's funny, I was just saying yesterday to my son, we were playing a game where it was a gratitude game. And I said, what 3 animals are you most grateful for? And he shared his, and then I shared mine. And what popped into my mind is I'm grateful for horses. I'm not really a horse person, but I'm grateful for them because I know so many people have such an incredible connection with them, and they let us ride around on their backs. They've done a lot for humans.
Totally.
Yeah. And the other comment I wanted to make is play and lightening up and having more fun. That's one of the Courageous Self-Care foundations. And I totally agree with you that as adults, we can get stuck in serious mode and everything is a big deal and it's hard work. And when we can lighten up and not take ourselves so seriously and access that childlike energy, it's so much more fun.
Totally.
Okay, what kind of dogs do you have?
Well, I have them in the room so that they don't bark, so I can show you.
Yay! Special guest appearance. Oh.
This is Dahlia. She is my biggest concern when doing anything online because she's the wild card.
Dahlia, the Dalmatian wild card. Awesome.
Is Turbo, and he doesn't like to be picked up.
Turbo. What kind is Turbo?
He's a border collie cross.
Nice. Well, we have never had special guest appearances by dogs before, so this is a Courageous Self-Care podcast first. We're breaking new ground here.
There you go.
I love it. And the other thing I wanted to say about playfulness is for me personally, I was actually a really serious kid, and I liked reading. I wanted to get good marks. There wasn't a whole lot of play, and it wasn't until I was in my 30s that people started telling me, like I went to these retreats and people would gaze into my eyes and look into my soul and they'd say, you're so playful. And I'm like, who are you seeing? Because I'm not playful, I'm serious.
Totally.
It has taken several years to access that playful energy. And oh my gosh, so much more fun.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's better to live a fun life, I think.
Absolutely. So have you always been playful or was it hidden in you too?
Well, I think I've always been playful, but I've definitely felt the constrictions of society. So I've always felt like I was more trapped in because there were expectations by my parents when I was younger of how you would behave in public, and expectations of your teachers of how you would behave in class, and expectations of your bosses of how you would behave at work. And breaking through those expectations and allowing me to be me has been a challenge, and it will always be a challenge.
Oh, all of those situations can totally dampen our playful spirit for sure. That made me think of a time when I worked in a cubicle and I had a friend next door, and we found there was like a little hole in the cubicle. So we would pass notes back and forth. And I had never passed notes in school because I didn't want to get in trouble. But at work, oh my gosh, it was so much fun. That was before cell phones. We couldn't text each other in those days.
Still, notes are more fun, I think.
Totally. Okay, let's move into the next part, which is, if you're a regular listener, you'll know what's coming up. We do a story of courage. And the reason that I love to get our guests to share a story of courage is because a lot of people, and I have this conversation so often, especially when I'm inviting people to be guests on the show, I say, would you like to be a guest and share a story of courage? And people will say, oh, no, I'm not courageous. And then I often know them. I'm like, yes, you are. To me, you are. So please share this particular story. And what I feel like as women is when we share our stories of courage, even though we might not define them as courageous, they are to other people. And then we're increasing like the collective courage muscle, and we can borrow other people's courage. So it's super powerful. So I'm excited to hear yours.
Okay, so times I have been courageous. I have a really good situation where I was on a retainer with a client, and I was always resistant to retainers because it felt like you were in this long-term relationship that wasn't regularly being negotiated and looked at, and it got to a crux where I just felt like it wasn't working. And so it's just like being in a marriage or, with your friends or your relationships, it wasn't working for me. So I went in there and I broke up with them, and I just, I slid in there with a big smile on my face because I had already decided what I needed to do. And I said, I'm about to become super unpopular because we've had this great working relationship for years. And I just said, like, this can't happen. Like, we can't be on a retainer anymore. Here's my notice. And we were severing ties. And it took us 2 months to work through that after they realized that, oh, they could shift and they could come to the table differently, because instead of treating me like an expert contractor, they started treating me like more of an employee. And that relationship got very messy and it wasn't working for me. And I could have let it go. I mean, it was great money and it provided stability for my business, but it made me really unhappy.
I love that. And I can totally identify. I've had 2 of those breakups recently, business breakups. And man, are they uncomfortable. Holy smokes.
Totally. Well, it's just like any breakup, because the other party is like, maybe I want to think about this. Maybe we'll give you like 24 hours to retract. And I'm like, I don't need to retract this. I'm good.
So I'm curious about, what were the warning signals for you that led you to want to make that decision?
For me, most of my warning symbols just come from how I feel. Like, I start to be constricted. I start to lose interest in the task. I don't want to do it. And as soon as I'm putting something off, there's a deeper reason behind that, because I'm a real type A. I'm always getting stuff done. And if I'm putting stuff off, I have to dig and figure out what the reason is behind that. And also when other people have baggage that they're bringing to the table, and my clients were going through huge upheavals in their management, and I was being dragged through the mud along with them, and it had nothing to do with me. And I had to just set my boundaries and say, I don't need to be part of this, and it's negatively affecting everything that I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are great warning signs that people who are like just on the cusp of that situation might not realize. And I resonate with those as well. The most recent one, like that just happened this week. I was all of a sudden, like, I went to Hawaii on speaker's retreat. And once I got there, I had been super productive with this work relationship up until I went there. And when I went to Maui, everything fell away. Like I didn't want to be productive at all anymore. And it was such a new energy. I'm like, what's going on here? And then I just started getting this really strong sense of knowing, intuition, that I was done. And then when I started to reflect on it and didn't do my work for a few days, I realized, oh my gosh, it has been making me so angry. And I don't actually like what I'm doing. I thought that I did, but it was really, there was this sense of anger towards all the different tasks that I was doing. And I noticed that it was starting to trickle over into the rest of my life. Like, I'm someone who doesn't complain. I made a commitment to myself in grade 8 that I wouldn't complain. And I was complaining about this work. And so I came back and let them know. And it was so hard. But today actually is my first day of freedom from that. Yay!
Awesome.
Yeah. And that it was worth going through the fear of letting that go and breaking up for just how good I feel today. So did you have a sense of freedom afterwards too?
Oh, definitely. And it's so funny because it's been almost 6 years since I quit my corporate job to go on as an entrepreneur. And you always think that that's going to be like the big fear and you push through and then you're done. But that's not true. Yeah. There's always new fears. And having a big client that you start to rely on for, years, and then all of a sudden you're quitting them. It's like, quitting another stable thing. And there's always fear because you have bills to pay, you have mortgages, I have dogs to feed, people have kids to feed, and you're paying for summer camps or vacations, and not knowing where that next piece of income is coming from is always uncomfortable.
Oh, so uncomfortable. And that's the interesting thing about courage, is it's different from bravery, which I talk about quite a bit. Bravery is you don't actually have fear around a circumstance. Other people might perceive you as being courageous or brave because they have a fear around it. But like, for instance, for me, I have no fear around public speaking. I love it. The bigger the crowd, the better for me. So I'm brave in that way, but courage, there's always fear. And so your heart is involved in courage because there is something on the other side, a value that you're moving towards. So what would you say was your value that was pulling you through that fear?
Oh, good question. I would say that my value, and I think everybody defines values differently, but I value myself and I value my right to live my life on my own terms. And I value space, and I value people treating me with a certain level of care and respect. And I think that for me, it really comes down to myself. Like, nobody else is spending their time 24/7 making sure that Elise is okay. Nobody else is going to do that. Like, even my mother, when I was a baby, there were other kids in the house. There were like other things going on, and she had to look after herself and, the household. And I think that we're responsible for ourselves. And when we see entrepreneurs burning out, I always just think, like, why don't you look in the mirror? Like, we're the one that's taking care of that. And I love that entrepreneurs are hustling, but there is to a fault, because they're hustling themselves often into stress that manifests in all sorts of weird ways and ends them up in the hospital. And that's not going to be me. Like, not going to be me.
And that's why that play aspect is so very important, especially for entrepreneurs and anyone in a high level position. I had a coach once who said, lots of entrepreneurs, like, you're your own boss, right? But so many entrepreneurs work for a tyrant.
Yes. Yes. Like, being nice to yourself is sometimes hard.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the other thing that you mentioned that I wanted to ask you about, I find fascinating, is boundaries. So you put up some boundaries. Have you always been great with boundaries, or was there a lesson in there that you learned at some point?
I definitely have always been good with boundaries, but it's funny how boundaries get pushed in and out, and there are sneaky tricksters in your life that can push them and you don't notice until you're like crunched in on your boundaries.
Yeah.
I've always been pretty vocal about what I wanted, but like you were talking about complaining, it's one thing to complain and say that there is something wrong, and there's a whole nother level of actually taking an action step. Because if we bring it up to someone or a situation that's not working and the parties involved say, hey, you know what, I'm sorry it doesn't work for you, but it's working fine for me, so I'm not doing it. And then you do nothing, you're like making a choice to suffer, or you can look at the situation and find solutions. And I have to say that I haven't always been great at finding solutions, because sometimes it's really, really hard to come up with a version, like breaking up with a client is a solution. Like if you talk to them and you can't find a resolution, then what options are you left with? And are you courageous enough to take that step in self-care? And for sure, now I am way better, but there are still times where I'm not sure what move to make, and I don't want to make a drastic move until I know that I am prepared to deal with the consequences. Because losing a big client means that you're going to hustle another client, or you're going to adjust how your revenue is flowing and not being able to have that constant cash flow. Or even, with friendships, I've had a lot of friendship breakups over the last 20 years, and those have been really hard, but necessary for me to continue on my path. And there are times when, you can allow yourself to sit and question whether or not that was the right decision. But my mom was good, and she taught me to make a decision and stick with it. And if you want to revert your decision later, you can, see if that's an option. But making decisions and being decisive is probably my best tip, and the thing that I always recommend to everybody is just make a decision. Move forward, because being stuck is worse.
Yes. Making no decision is the decision to continue to suffer and struggle.
Yeah, totally.
And most people are terrible at making decisions. And that's a whole other form of self-care. Decision making. I love it. Oh, that was so much great, juicy information, Elise. Thank you for sharing that story and all the other parts that we got into. That was fascinating and entertaining and delightful. So thank you.
Welcome.
So if people want to, now that they've fallen in love with you, they want to know more and find out what you offer, where can they go to do that?
Well, our website is ponyfriday.com. We're on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Our handle is just @ponyfriday, so we're really easy. If they want to email us, it's info@ponyfriday.com. And if they want to spend some time with me, I've got boot camps running. So we have a Be Boldly boot camp next weekend in March. I don't know if this podcast is airing live. Is it?
Not live, no.
So we have a bunch of boot camps every couple of months for entrepreneurs to behave boldly, and Christina is actually a speaker at some of them. So you can do this both.
It's a good time and a fantastic event. And so those are running regularly throughout the year.
Yes.
So no matter when you're listening to this, there will be one coming up.
Yes, and those are in Calgary, but we're also currently trying to figure out how to offer the program online so that people can attend anywhere, and that's in the works.
Very good. And tell everyone why your company's named Pony Friday. I just love it.
Well, the simple answer is I wanted to have the most fun possible, and everyone loves ponies and everyone likes Fridays. So together, boom, it's the best possible combo.
I love it. That's awesome. And I also have an invitation. So you heard Elise's story of courage, and it has boosted your courage muscle. If you feel like you have a story of courage, and especially if you don't feel like you have a story of courage, I would love to interview you on the show. So you can go to ChristinaMarlette.com and apply to be a guest. All right, that brings us to the end of today. Elise, thank you so much. This was just absolutely joyful.
Awesome. Thank you, Christina.
You're welcome. Be sure to come back to listen again. The Courageous Podcare. That's a whole different kind of podcast. It's Podcare. The Courageous Self-Care podcast airs Monday through Friday, so you can tune in as often as you like. And I'm going to leave you with the thought that I share every single time we do this, that self-care is not selfish. It is the opposite, in fact, because when you are prioritizing your own well-being, like Elise said, there's no one else spending 24/7 making sure that you're okay. You show up in a much more loving way. You benefit from all the care you're giving to yourself. Everyone in your circle benefits. And then that energy of care and love and nurturing is echoing out and making a dramatic impact throughout the world. So make sure that you practice some strategic, courageous self-care. I look forward to connecting with you again next time. Bye-bye for now.